This story is fucked up and the details are horrific. This is Derek Rosa, a 13-year-old straight-A honor roll student from Florida, and his mom, 39-year-old Irina Garcia. Irina had just given birth to a baby girl 14 days ago, but now that baby is without a mother and the family's life is changed forever. One night last week, police say Derek waited until his mom fell asleep in their apartment and then stabbed her multiple times in the neck, knifing her to death as she slept. She was just inches away from the crib containing her newborn daughter. And then, the 13-year-old boy called 911 and politely told them what happened, even apologizing for what he did. Officers raced to the family's apartment. Derek was respectful and apologetic to the police when they arrived. This video shows his arrest. That's him with his hands up. Fortunately, the baby was unharmed. Cops still have no idea why this all went down. Derek had no known history of mental illness and apparently got along well with his stepfather, a truck driver who was out of town at the time. The family also had no run-ins with the police prior to this incident. He was taken to a juvenile detention center and then later to a hospital after he allegedly threatened to harm himself. Sources say authorities are searching his social media to find a motive. He's being held until his next court date in November. He's been charged with second-degree murder.
Sliced off her skin to make this bodysuit. She was alive when the skinning began. Her arms and face weren't found, and her nipples had been removed.
Well, we about to get into a crazy story, crazy disturbing story about some guy taking people's skin and stuff like that. So, as you can see from that guy, that chapter, I should say, that's the guy from that chapter. You know what I'm saying? I love watching his videos, and you know, his ending just be something different. But if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, it's free. Like and comment. And I hope you guys are having a blessed, beautiful day.
January 6th, 1999, a small tugboat called the Elk was sailing on the Vistula River. It was very dark as the boat slowly moved up the river. As the boat was approaching the dock, its engines slowing down, Captain Michosov heard this big thump coming from the rear of the boat. Drove over to the dock seat, got out of his car, and he was like, "Here, listen, better check what we caught last night." It was like made of this weird material, almost like leather, but not as hard, and pale. Grossly pale, like something that had been in the water for a long time. He was looking at a lump of human skin. He immediately called the police, who rushed down to see this very disturbing sight. It was found to be the skin of a woman. Just the skin, no organs or anything like that. It had been sliced off and fashioned into a vest of some kind. Divers went down to the area of the river it had been found. And down there, they located a few more parts of a woman's body. Bits of a buttock and a leg. They were found at the bottom of the river. It was determined that this skin had been cut off with surgical precision and sewed into a bodysuit. Immediately, the investigation began to find out who this woman was and what had happened to her. Who had done this to her? The identity of the victim was revealed to be one Katarzyna Zawada, a 23-year-old university student who had been living in eastern Krakow with her mother. Katarzyna went by Kasia, who was studying religion at Jagiellonian University, November 12th, 1998, when Kasia vanished. And so weeks went by. The police did start eventually looking for her as a missing person. Lots, nothing. Until almost 2 months later, on a cold night in January, when a boat hit something in the river. Kasia had been kidnapped, or perhaps, lured somewhere, and then she had been tortured, she'd been beaten, she'd been drugged, and then it's believed the killer carefully sliced off her skin to make this bodysuit. And it's believed she was alive when the skinning began. Her arms and face weren't found, and her nipples had been removed also, which led the police to think that there was a sexual element to this entire crime. Then, after slicing off the skin, the killer had carefully sewed it back together, creating the suit. Kasia had stopped attending university in the weeks before she disappeared. She had also dyed her hair black, had begun losing weight, and had changed her style of clothing, began dressing very, very differently to how she had been before. She also had begun taking trips outside of the city, but who she was meeting in the cottages and in the countryside outside of Krakow, nobody knew. They did have a person of interest who was unnamed, a guy who lived outside the city, who had a habit of harassing women, watching them with binoculars, writing vulgar letters. He also liked buying and wearing women's underwear. And someone had also seen him visiting Kasia's grave numerous times. They would say they saw him going there all the time. He would go and leave a candle, but ultimately, other than being a bit of a creep, there was nothing to charge him with. 4 months later, in May of 1999, body of a dead man. Decapitated. The head had been degloved. The face had been removed from the head. The elderly man had called the police, saying he had found his adult grown-up son strung up upside down in his basement like this. It was quickly determined that the dead guy's son had done this to him, leaving the body strung up in his grandfather's basement. Vladimir W. was 26 years old, originally from Russia, and had attended the same university Kasia did. In May of 1999, he lured his father down to the basement and then tried to electrocute him, stun him with a stun gun. But when that didn't work, he whipped out a knife and he stabbed his own father to death. Then he hung his dad up, cut off his head, and removed the skin. Then he began wearing his own father's face. Then went to go meet his grandfather, who would eventually report all this. He met his grandfather at a bench in the middle of town. The grandfather did not realize that this was not his son. It was, in fact, his grandson wearing his son's face. See, the grandfather had really bad eyesight, so he couldn't really make him out. Vladimir later said the murder of his dad was just an act of revenge for something. That's never been revealed, but it was later determined he had nothing to do with her death. They did go to attend the same college, the same university at the same time, but they never crossed paths. Years would go by. It wasn't until 2017, almost 20 years later, that a break was made in the case. A letter was sent in to the police. The person who wrote it said that their friend, 52-year-old Robert Janczewski, was Kasia's killer. Robert was living with his mother in 2017 in Krakow, the son of a poet who had left his mother for another woman. Growing up, his parents were very religious and physical and emotional violence were common. He was involved with the police twice in the early 90s. Both times, actually, he was the victim of assaults, which led him to pick up martial arts to defend himself. For work, he began in the Polish military, before he ended up in a morgue dissecting human corpses. And he also worked at the Krakow Zoology Institute, where he saw how animal skins were being prepared. He was later fired from his job at the Zoology Institute when one day he killed all the rabbits for no reason whatsoever. When he was asked, he had no explanation for why he did that. He was the guy who was harassing women and had visited Kasia's grave multiple times back in 1990. In fact, he was a suspect from the start. Even back then, neighbors of Robert said, it's probably him. He's a bit of an oddball, you know, a bit of a weirdo. The police just never had enough to go on. Now they searched his home in a cottage outside of Krakow, right? And they found two things. One, blood in the bathroom, which even all these years later was determined to be Kasia's. And two, his diary, his good old little scribbler, so he was. He had a little diary where he detailed his stalking of women, but more importantly, what he did to Kasia. He was arrested, but denied killing her. Robert worked in the same market square Kasia often went to. She always hung out there, so that's likely where they met, and it became romantic. She dyed her hair black because that was his preferred hair color. Most likely the day she went missing, Robert went to where she lived in the city. He said, here, listen, come out, let's go out to my cottage outside the city. We'll have a nice, beautiful, romantic day. It'll be great. But instead, what he did when they got to the cottage is he lured her down to the basement where her screams could not be heard. He then tortured her, abused her, and skinned her, likely while she was still alive, though hopefully not conscious. He was an expert in skinning and the treatment of skin, so he knew what he was doing. He then tried to wear it, but she was a good bit smaller than him, so it simply just wasn't the right size. So he chucked it in the river, where it would be found in January. Robert, in prison, accused the guards of harassing him, claims later determined to be baseless, and lying to police was also added to his list of charges. He was later diagnosed as a schizophrenic. He was convicted of Kasia's murder and sentenced to life in prison. But the body of Kasia has still never been found to this day. The only thing they ever found was what this case is called skin. Till the next one. I'll see you then. Please, until then, look after each other. Look after yourselves. Do it for me. Because I love you. Mike.
Man, that was quite disturbing. This dude up here sewing and taking off body parts of people while they alive. And then the crazy thing about it is, he did this to his father. Okay, approached his grandfather with, ooh, boy. I just hit the tingle in my body a certain way. And I don't need to be feeling like that trying to record this video. But just the thinking of seeing something like that is very disturbing. And I'm sorry, I ain't no way. I mean, how could you even go wearing something like that. You know what I'm saying? Like, what in the hell is wrong with this man? What? Other than that, this let me know to be careful when I go to them foreign places, because this looked like it was in a foreign town. That's a whole nother type of like hostile type shit. You know what I'm saying? Y'all know the movie when they had 1 and 2.